Hi, my name is Anna Walker-Roberts, and I run the CTE Digital Video program and the drama program at Science Leadership Academy. When I came to teach at SLA in 2017, the district had just announced pretty recently that they were going to be moving Science Leadership Academy out of their building on 55 North 22nd Street and co-locating it with Benjamin Franklin High School. So when I came into SLA, I already knew that the move was going to happen, but it was kind of a distant thing. So I more or less settled into a couple of years of my classroom at the location on 55 North 22nd Street. However, I was very involved in conversations with the construction companies and the architects about how to set up my space so it could be a functioning digital video lab and choose furniture and all those things. So that was always kind of a thing that was going on. And I started visiting the Benjamin Franklin building. I think the first time I went over was the fall of 2017. We went over to start to figure out where the two CTE programs would be located, because at Ben Franklin, they have a basement where all their CTE programs are housed. So would our two CTE programs be in that basement, or would they be somewhere else? And ultimately, they ended up being placed on the 6th floor on the SLA side of the building. But at the time when we were looking, we weren't sure if the model would be two side-by-side schools, or one school being like floor 1 through 3 and one being 4 through 6. So my first visit there, Ben Franklin was still using the whole building. So during the summer of 2019, our building was scheduled to be done in July, at the very end of July. So I did spend time that summer going through the building and its various stages of construction before teachers went back to school. When it was time for school to start and all the teachers are coming back and we're all trying to set up our classrooms, well, the building wasn't done. There were just so many things that weren't done. There were entire classrooms that weren't done. There were places where the ceiling or the flooring wasn't done. The bathrooms weren't completed. There weren't stalls in the bathrooms. There were places where the electrical outlets didn't work. There were rooms that didn't have air conditioners. There were rooms that didn't have furniture. Like none of the science rooms were done. None of them had sinks or anything. And, it was daunting to come into that space and think, how are we going to make this work for school? Missing all these different classrooms and spaces, even not having a cafeteria that was finished, and the cafeteria wasn't approved. It hadn't passed its health and safety, and the space where our students were supposed to eat, which is like a big commons area, it wasn't done at all, and they were just putting up a plywood wall to hide the construction that was ongoing. And it felt hard coming into the situation where it's already hard to move, and then to move into a building that's going to remain under construction was difficult. So for me, my digital video space wasn't done, and I was sharing a classroom with a history teacher who was lovely, and he was very, generous with his classroom and letting me set up how I needed to, but I didn't have any of my equipment. It was all still in storage in the auditorium. So I had no cameras and no computers, and how am I going to run a digital video program without any of that equipment? So, it's one thing to run a unit for a month or two where the kids are doing screenwriting or cell phone videos or focusing on pre-production or something they don't necessarily need that equipment for. But imagining doing that for a half a year or an entire year becomes a lot more challenging. And that's kind of the situation that we were faced with. Yeah, I would say that because I had been in the building over the summer, I wasn't shocked that it wasn't done at the beginning of the school year. So the construction timeline, I just feel, was never realistic for a project that had that level of work that needed to be done, and I have no expertise in construction. I just, looking around during the summer, never felt like it was going to be completed by the beginning of the school year. However, I would never have predicted that the asbestos event would have happened in the way that it did, and that it would continue to happen the way that it has been across the district.
Hundreds of students and parents are in limbo tonight as crews struggle to eliminate a dangerous health hazard at two Philadelphia schools.
Though the superintendent promises students will be relocated at the very latest by next Thursday, no word tonight on exactly where they will be going.
I think that my initial response to the asbestos was just was maybe rooted in ignorance. I knew what asbestos was, but I didn't have a concept of how them finding asbestos would affect our entire school year in the way that it has.
Closed indefinitely. That's the word from the school district's top official after workers uncovered asbestos during renovations at 2 Philadelphia schools which share the same building.
There will be no return to that facility until construction is at a point where it is safe for children to return.
And though Philadelphia School District Superintendent William Hite says the problem is being fixed.
I know it's been frustrating and it's created a lot of anxiety for children and their families.
The concerns from the Ben Franklin side of the campus have been going on for over 18 months. So this is not new to us.
But he wants to make sure the district relocates staff and students to adequate facilities.
If you have to move us. But don't put us in a place where we cannot educate our students to the best of our ability.
I definitely was in communication with a lot of the other teachers immediately after they announced that this was happening. I think what happened for me right after the event with them finding the asbestos and our school being displaced is that we essentially decided as a school that our core classes needed to continue to function at as normal a level as possible using virtual school and Canvas and our online learning management systems so that students could continue submitting work and learning to some extent. Because my class is so hands-on and reliant upon technology for the students to do work, the CTE programs did not continue to assign work. So my focus shifted from designing curriculum and working with students to not having classes for 3 weeks, but participating in the task force that formed with parents and teachers and working with the district much more closely to say, here are our needs and here are suggestions and solutions for the problems that we're facing. So it was definitely a big shift for me in my role as a teacher to shift from I'm working with students to I'm more of an advocate. So when we initially heard that we would probably be relocated to another building, pretty quickly it seems like the buildings that were suggested were Southern High School and Strawberry Mansion. And it was never maybe specifically said in those early stages which school would be placed where, but eventually at the town hall meetings, what was pitched was that Ben Franklin would be moved to Strawberry Mansion and that SLA would be moved to Southern. Now, I'm not from Philadelphia originally, and the only school that I've taught at in the district is SLA. And I think that the concerns that people brought up about students going to school in these different neighborhoods were very valid, and I just don't have a lot of experience with all of the neighborhoods in Philly or those specific schools in Philly to know what the conditions of those buildings are or exactly what issues would surround students from one neighborhood going to school in another. But I think all those concerns are very valid. So I think identifying that the campus model would work for us was definitely important in finding the location that we have now, which is in the first floor of 440 and up until the end of the semester, the basement of Rodef Shalom. In many ways, I feel like it was the best solution that was available for us, and we have definitely been making it work. I feel that the different offices in the district, and I have no idea which ones, it has probably burdened them to have us be present in this building. And I'm sure that at times it has been frustrating for people who are working in an office setting to have students moving through the hallways and, being loud like teenagers are. And there's inevitably just some pressure that goes along, or some tension that probably goes along with us being placed here. But I ultimately think it has been a pretty good fit. I mean, the condition of the facilities at 440 is great. It's a lovely building and everything's in very good condition. So other than having to bring in projectors for each of the classrooms, things were pretty set up for us. It's still kind of like living out of a hotel, and no matter how nice the hotel is, it's not your home. So we're all kind of living out of boxes, as you can, literally see behind me, that there's a lot of that in every classroom. There's way less storage for us to have, and a lot of teachers are missing materials that they need to run their programs. Like, we don't have science labs. So the science classes just had to rewrite their curriculum, so there's no labs. Or our engineering department doesn't have any of their equipment. So they're learning things that are still related to engineering but don't involve any of the equipment. And, that's hard, so it's not great. It's not ideal. Rodef Shalom didn't have any internet until a few weeks ago, and that was difficult for teachers who are teaching in a one-to-one school where students all have computers and we do a lot of our work online. And some of the rooms that we're using don't have real walls. They're carpet dividers, and that's not the most conducive to classroom environments, to feel like, oh, we have to be quiet if someone on the other side is talking. So it has had its challenges. So even before I was a teacher at Science Leadership Academy, I had observed at the school and attended EDUCON. And something that I really noticed about SLA immediately was that it had a very specific, quirky, project-based culture that was okay with kids working in the hall and kids having a lot of freedoms and a lot of agency and independence. And there was just this kind of subtle creative chaos throughout the building at all times, where classes were going around and filming things, or where kids were out in the hall working on projects or working on monologues or plays or scenes or building a catapult. And it had a very quirky energy to it that I think made the school, that was a really important part of the school, was their culture of being that way. And it was very much unlike other schools that I have been in. I am continually skeptical about dates that are given for anything, because so far the only consistent thing that has happened with dates is that they have not been met. So you can give me a date and I'm gonna remain hopeful that we will move in mid-February, but I'm also not gonna be totally shocked if it's March, or if we just say, we're gonna stay here for the rest of the year. I'll be disappointed, but I don't think I'll be incredibly surprised, because what has happened so far is that deadlines have not been met. I would say that I'm incredibly proud of our students for how they've responded to this whole situation. They have continued to show up at town hall meetings, at rallies in Harrisburg, at Healthy Schools rallies in Philadelphia. They have made posters, they have spoken, they have posted things on Instagram and social media, and know that they have a story that's worth telling, and they have an important viewpoint that needs to be expressed. I'm grateful to teach at a school where we prepare students to do that and believe that their voices should be heard. I think it's such a shame that this is the way in which it has to happen, but I have very much enjoyed and been incredibly proud of our students for the way that they've responded outwardly, and also within our community, helping to take care of each other, finding ways to laugh and still enjoy this school year, even though it has been much different than we imagined.
On February 18th, we eventually moved back to the SLA Ben Franklin building. SLA's biggest fundraising event, EDUCON, was hosted at 440 before we moved back.
Ben Franklin found a space that was at Kepra Charter School, and they're all contained in one building, other than their CTE programs go to use other buildings at times. And I'm not sure what the schedule is like for that.
Although when I visited, all spirits seemed high. A lot of people were very positive in the environment, the teachers, the students, a lot of them happy with where they were, and a lot of them excited for the new building they would be going back to. During our short time merged together, there wasn't much interaction between the two schools. There was a program called Outward Bound that kind of got the younger classes to know each other and do activities together. At the time, they weren't really focusing on the upper classes, as most of us would be gone before we had a chance to know each other. Once we returned, the building felt more complete. Not entirely finished, but somewhere where we could live as a community, where we weren't interfering with other people or other events going on around us. It was a nice environment to be in. We didn't totally interact with Ben Franklin still, but it was nice while we were there. We were there for about 18 days before the second shutdown happened.
Our kids were safer staying in school. They get breakfast. Let me finish. They get breakfast. They get lunch. They get a safe place to be. They get homework. They get knowledge. They have after-school activities, and sometimes after-school care. We didn't want to change all that, so it wasn't a decision that we made. Our kids are as important as the kids in Montgomery County or anywhere else, and to imply that is wrong. And it just makes things worse.
I get it, but the perception is.
The perception, whatever the perception is, the reality is we wanted to keep the schools open. And because of decisions made by other governments and the governor, we can't do that. And we're going to do our best to make it better. But the perception is inaccurate. Our kids are important.
We were displaced from our building. Ben Franklin wasn't able to continue to have school, and I'm putting that in quotes because even at SLA it wasn't like a full school program doing it online. But they essentially just stopped their classes for 3 weeks. And that's really hard as a teacher to think, okay, what am I gonna cut out of my curriculum that I guess I can't do this year, and how are we going to pick up? And especially for students that have individualized education plans or 504 plans and maybe are already struggling a little bit to stay on top of the work, taking a 3-week break probably is not the most helpful way to keep everybody on track. And that's something that we've struggled with. So prior to moving in together, we did make an effort for teachers from both schools to have the opportunities to meet with each other and talk about the way that we do school. There was a unity club that was formed so that students were able to meet each other between the two schools. And I think the efforts that were put into having conversations about co-locating prior to the move were probably helpful to making it, as much as it was not a smooth transition, I feel that that had everything to do with construction and very little to do with two communities living in the building. It's hard to say that it's been a good experience. It's been a good experience working with all the Ben Franklin teachers. This year has not maybe been a great experience.
Throughout this year, I've been able to document and observe and just learn about all those people around me from both communities, mainly SLA. All the interactions I had with the staff and students at Ben Franklin were really wonderful as well. I met a lot of nice people, and a lot of people were very supportive of my project and wanted to help me in any way they could. Although I was able to experience all this, I wasn't able to document and put it here to share with all of you. In future, this is something I need to do by managing my time better and make sure I'm actually getting the experiences of these people rather than getting an outside perspective. I hope to come back to this project in the future more prepared and able to get more interviews and make a fully fledged series as opposed to a 1-episode kind of short. I wouldn't have been able to accomplish something like this if it wasn't for the help of all my classmates and teachers. As it currently stands, my senior class will not be returning to the building. The lower classes will go back there for their next year and hopefully have more interaction and a better experience with both schools, where there's no delays, no constructions, and no interference from outside sources. Again, thank you to all those people who helped and supported me throughout this project. I wouldn't have been able to do any of this if it wasn't for all of you.
And go home, you guys. Wait, do you hear that? Do you hear that? That's the sound of summer. It's calling. Amadou, come out of the building. I'm waiting for you. It's summer. It's calling you. Bye.